Welcome to the podcast. His name is Tobias. You can call me Nelly, and it's a special kind of this time around because it's the final you're getting from us all year. I know it's been a great year. We've worked year round to give you one of the best shows I've never seen, and we want to cap that off here. There's that time, Toby, you remember when we did that one thing? Yeah, that was great.
Oh yeah, that one thing.
Oh.
Yeah, that one thing.
You worked so hard on that one thing. It was crazy when it came out. I was just like, wow, man.
Yeah, it was absolutely, it was spectacular.
And then there was the milestone that we hit that 1 month, you know? That time of year was just, it was so happening.
That's to say,
But
2024 was a bit of a blur.
yeah, for the most part. 2025 is almost here, and that means it's time to take a look back at 2024 as best we can. Today's checkpoint, we'll be discussing some of our favorite and least favorite games that we've played this year. A lot of my games will be from previous years, which is why we will also be giving spotlight to games or DLCs that came out this year, but we couldn't get to. And to wrap it all up, we'll be talking about the Game Awards, notable winners, nominations, and reveals that happened, hopefully. Hopefully we have enough time for that. But because this is episode 1, I want to take some time to go back even further and talk about the end of 2023 and what that year had to offer for us. Just a little bit of context for 2024. 2023 was huge. Obviously, Game of the Year was Baldur's Gate 3. I think for a lot of people before that year would have never even taken a second look at something like Baldur's Gate 3, but it was year defining, genre defining even. And I know that you played a lot of that, Toby, in 2024, but did you start that in 2023?
I believe I had bought Baldur's Gate 3 first time because I have it digitally, and then I also got the deluxe physical edition. I started it at either the end of November or the beginning of December. I played for about 10 hours and then I did not pick it back up until 2024. I will definitely be talking about Baldur's Gate 3 later when it comes to the games that I really spent a ton of time with this year and thoroughly enjoyed through my 113 hour playthrough. It's a large game to say the least, but yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, for that game I would have never probably considered even picking up like a turn-based RPG, but because it was D&D and because of its reception, I did pick it up. Fun fact, I'm actually playing through the original Baldur's Gate right now. I started it. It like unlocked a whole new genre and type of game to play through that I'm interested now.
Yeah. I mean, that time, just in general, at least for me, was very positive. I mean, certain aspects weren't, but for gaming in general, it's just Baldur's Gate 3 was such a good surprise. And as someone who never played those kind of games, who wasn't even really interested in D&D other than maybe the D&D movie that came out earlier that year.
Not bad.
Yeah, I
was
saw that. I
shocked. But it wasn't bad. I didn't really have many complaints from it.
Sadly, I don't think any other like series or movies are going to come from it, but I had fun with it.
This is completely off topic, but the way I experienced that movie was through a DVD that my roommate bought while we were taking a trip to Idaho, and it was at a thrift store in some small town with like less than 3,000 people. He's like, oh, I'll pick this up. And that's how we watched it. Completely off topic, but wild.
So just real quick, was it like a bootleg version?
No, it was a real DVD. The quality was so poor.
It's probably like 480p or something.
Yeah, it did not look great. It also didn't help that we watched it on 4K TV, but you know.
Yeah, that upscaling though. Well, that sounds like a good, fun trip to have. You know, cap it off with a little crappy or a good DVD, but a crappy quality. Adding to the good times of that whole year, I really hyped myself up at the end of 2023. Things were going great. I got myself a PS5 and I started playing just every game that I could. I remember I bought Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 in a package. Still haven't played them.
Oh.
Did play a couple other horror games though. Yes.
Oh, you need to play those. What?
I will.
Oh man, that hurts.
But listen,
it hurts my heart.
I also got Dead Space Remastered and Resident Evil 4 at the same time. I was just trying to fill my library mainly, but
fair enough.
I did play those games. I was able to get to RE4 and Dead Space. I played Dead Space beforehand. Really, really liked that. That was a great experience. I still need to platinum that. I think I have one more playthrough for that. RE4 started, didn't finish until 2024, but it was still pretty fun. I know you really like that game, Toby.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then Ragnarok, I started Alan Wake. Alan Wake was
Watch your next words very carefully.
It was huge for me, is what I will say. It was a huge eye-opener. Right. I love when games do that. They open my eyes to a different corner of gaming that I haven't really been subjected to, you know, other than maybe like a quick YouTube video or whatever. But Alan Wake was a nice surprise. It was a nice change of pace, especially compared to all of the other, like, I wouldn't call Alan Wake horror, but it's trying to be, right? Because it's about a horror novel, kind of. It's decently scary at times, and it was just a nice pace going back and forth from RE4 to Alan Wake or Dead Space to Alan Wake, and sort of having a more clunky vibe, a more retro aesthetic to it. And the story was good. I understood it, but I think it was Control that really captured me towards the end of that year.
That's fair.
Yeah, I just saw so much potential in like the later parts of that story that kept me like on track for Alan Wake. That was like, I have to complete Alan Wake to fully understand Control so that, you know, I can truly enjoy Control and then go to Alan Wake 2. But to stay on Control was crazy. Control was very interesting because I think I picked it up when it came out on release. I don't know. I think I played it on computer and it didn't really run well. So I put it down. I had the same problem with Cyberpunk. Yeah, the story that Control was telling was very cerebral to me. And I could tell it wasn't very surface level, but that's all I was getting at the start was the surface.
You finished Control in 2024?
I finished Control in 2024, but I played the bulk of it in 2023.
I see.
And
okay.
Yeah, so it took me a while to come back to Control, but I think it was the point at which I started to take Remedy seriously, because Alan Wake kind of felt like, okay, someone really wanted to make a game here and they really made a game, but they need to keep at it because this is not something that I would recommend to a lot of people.
It's a cult classic.
Yeah. It's definitely, if someone's been playing a lot of games and they're run dry, I'll say give Alan Wake a try. But if they're in the midst of like playing like Marvel Rivals and then Indiana Jones, I couldn't give him Alan Wake. I just couldn't do it.
That's valid. That's a valid statement. I really don't have anything I can say against that, even as a massive Alan Wake fan.
I think just to emphasize what 2023 did for me was just made me realize how great games were again. But also just how like even the subgenres like horror has completely different takes going from one game to another. I mean, the original Alan Wake came out around the same time as the original Dead Space, right?
The original Dead Space came out in 2008. And then Alan Wake came out in 2010. So they were fairly close together.
Yeah. Even those original games are insanely different. To have them both reach me in 2023 and carry me through 2024 and still thinking about those games and having them impact what I played in 2024, I just think that was important to talk about here at the start, going into some of our favorite games of 2024. And I played a lot of Remedy.
As did I.
Unfortunately, they're only in my honorable mentions.
Oh, boo.
Yeah.
I'll stop giving you shit for it.
It's okay. Everybody else is going to give me shit for it.
It'll balance out. Don't you worry.
It'll balance out. I'm interested, Toby. The start of 2024. What headspace were you in at that time? What games were you trying to complete?
Yeah, so I'll touch on a briefly kind of about my journey with games in 2023. I came into the year with like excitement for like a lot of games. I didn't play too many games in 2022. I was kind of slowly starting to get back into playing games and catching up on stuff I hadn't played in a while. It was like the first year where I was like really back into buying new games since Black Ops 4 came out. So yeah, I went to the year having like big titles that I knew I was going to buy, those being the Dead Space remake, RE4, and Dead Island 2. And then kind of from there, I just ended up buying more new games that came out. I got Spider-Man 2 in 2023. I got Baldur's Gate 3 in 2023. So I kind of just got back into playing new games for the first time in years. When it came to like the volume of releases I was buying, it was probably the most ever. So 2023 was like the perfect year to kind of just go back full into the swing of things because there was no shortage of anything to play. Like there was something regardless of genre, and I got to even branch out within that too, which was super fun. Starting in 2024, I had a little bit of a different approach because there wasn't like those 3 big releases that I was like super looking forward to in the year. I kind of went into this year of just being like, hey, I'm really back into games right now. I have a huge backlog that I've neglected and completely paid no attention to for a super long time. And I had bought a ton of games on sale in 2023 and 2022 that I needed to catch up on. But kind of as the year went on, it was a bit of a slower start, at least for me personally, than 2023 was. But my first honorable mention, and it'll be the only honorable mention I give, Stellar Blade was a very nice surprise for me. It has some of the
Thank
most...
you for mentioning that.
Absolutely. I didn't buy it at release, but I was kind of keeping an eye on it. And after kind of seeing the game's reception, it kind of just hit all the points that like I needed to. A slightly existentialist story. Cool. You have me sold. The soundtrack, beautiful. The combat, I've never been too much of a hardcore action gamer, but I don't know. It all kind of came together and I was like, you know what? I haven't played anything that's really like AAA that's released this year, so I'm going to give Stellar Blade a shot. Fell in love with it. It's unlike anything I've ever played. Like some games feel like a little bit floaty. With Stellar Blade, it's just so like tactile. The game gets absolutely bonkers, especially the further you go on with all the abilities and stuff, but there's just something about it that feels so satisfying. Like it has the best parry in any game I've played.
Interesting.
I know that might be a weird detail, but I feel like for the people who've played Stellar Blade, it's so satisfying. Like the combat, it just feels great. And because it's literally the backbone of the game, it really does carry it. The boss fights are great. Some of the best boss fights I've ever played in any game. Really the only thing that holds it back for me is the last like 3 hours, or for me it was like 8. The difficulty spike was insane. I was trying to brute force the last boss, like just trying to sit there and do it. I probably tried it over 50 times and couldn't do it. I had to call out of work the next day because I was so brain dead from it.
Damn.
But then I came back and finally beat it. But that's really the only thing holding back for me. The story, a lot of people have kind of pointed out that, you know, it does kind of have some like pacing issues, but the world that they designed, even if the story isn't told the best, the world is just beautiful. The soundtrack to everything is just absolutely gorgeous, and the combat, the backbone of the game, is the most satisfying combat I've ever experienced in any game ever.
I think the combat speaks to where that game took you for the rest of the year, but we'll save that for later, I think. I'm interested about the parry because not many people, I've heard people talk about the game, but not many people mention that aspect. They talk a lot about the fighting mechanics, but nothing about the parry. I think that's interesting. I think the year before that, Liza P came out, and it had another great parry system or parry mechanic. And then there's Sekiro as well. I don't know if you've played those at all. I hear a lot more about those games and their parry system compared to Stellar Blade. So
it takes a lot of inspiration from those games. Okay. I think, yeah, the thing with Stellar Blade is it is an amalgamation. Like it feels like so many different things. And in that, like, I think Control kind of does this as well. You kind of have like your standard game mechanics and then the story is insane. Stellar Blade is more so of like, it takes so many different inspirations like gameplay wise. Like it does specifically take a lot of inspiration from like Dark Souls, but like it's not like a Souls-like.
Yeah, and I thank you for mentioning this game because it's not one high on my list, but it's definitely one I want to get to next year at some point. And that's mainly because what I'm hearing is not a lot of what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is, I think the company who made it mostly worked on mobile games beforehand.
Yeah, it was their first like AAA like console game, which is even more impressive that they released Stellar Blade. Like, I love a good underdog story.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least from my perspective, where I'm seeing it and it doesn't look filled. It doesn't seem like a fully tight system, but I'm willing to be wrong and I'm open to being wrong, which is why I will pick that game up going into next year.
It's definitely one of those games that feels better than it looks. I'd say.
I bet. just from hearing about it. Yeah, you've started that physical collection much more up in 2023 going into 2024, and you've been keeping me up to date on that, and I'm very impressed by it. I feel like at some point, maybe if we can work on the community tab in this YouTube page, we might be able to show people what you got going. But yeah, I'm impressed by
71 games right now.
Ooh,
Mostly PS5. Mostly PS5.
Yeah, I mean, here on YouTube, you're saturated with the people who have full game rooms, all 4 to 6 walls covered in, video games throughout the decades. But
it's too many games for one person.
As someone who stopped in, you said Black Ops 4, which was 2018, which was 5 years before 2023. It's 6 years ago now. You've been collecting for a year and some change, maybe?
Mostly, yeah. I decided I was going to start collecting games again and really get into it and kind of make it something I was going to focus on as a hobby. Probably, I think it was February or March of this year. And I think before then I had just from games I've had over the years, I think I was under 20. So when you put it like that, I have spent a pretty penny, and most of it was rebuying games that I had bought digitally and liked, and buying a lot of my favorite games, like the games I played in 2023. I bought Dead Island 2 digitally, I bought Dead Space digitally, I bought RE4 digitally, I bought Spider-Man 2, Baldur's Gate 3, all those digitally. A lot of 2024 was kind of playing catch up, so to say, for a lot of my favorite games or games that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what 2023 did to us, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because there were such huge games that came out. And then, like you said, going into 2024, it kind of felt like a little bit stagnant, where it's okay.
Yeah.
I can touch on some of the games that I didn't get to in 2023. I've got a backlog that I've been adding to for years now that I can finally touch on. And then 2024 comes around and it's okay, here's Stellar Blade, and then here's Helldivers, and then here's, trying to think of something that came out in the summer. There was a Cyberpunk update at some point, which got me back into playing it. I mean, we'll talk about it, but 2024 just kind of popped out of nowhere and became another good year for gaming. It had a slow start, but it was very strong towards the middle and the end there. And it had one of the biggest flops of any year, but I still don't think it competes with Lord of the Rings Gollum and that stupid ass
the
King
Walking
Kong
Dead
game
Destinies.
that came out. The Walking Dead as well. Oh my god!
And the Avatar Quest for Balance game? No.
Oh my god! Yes. Dude, I have wiped that out of my memory. This isn't even supposed to be a section in this, but it's just 2023 was a great year, but it was a much more iffy year where it was we knew what we were getting, but the stuff that came in between that was But 2024 was just banger, banger, banger. We got Astrobot, and then we got Space Marine 2. And then around that time was Plucky Squire, which wasn't that great. But then shortly after that, we got Metaphor. And then earlier in the year was Persona 3 Reload. I mean, front to back, this year was crazy. And I think overall, for a lot of people, Baldur's Gate 3 tops everything. But then there's the other section of people who think Erdtree tops everything. I think 2024 was just a more consistent year all around. And I really appreciate... there's a disagreement here.
I would probably disagree.
Okay.
But I think the main reason, because I want to keep this light so we can get into our top 5 games for the year. But for me, I think that 2024 had probably, I say this very loosely, it had more highs, but I think 2023 was more consistent, especially when you break it down by genre. If we're looking at horror games, which I'm super into, you had Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, and Alan Wake 2. That's wild. For fighter games, you had Mortal Kombat 1, you had Street Fighter 6. I feel like when you break it down into the specific genres, I think there's multiple examples that you can think of, and I think 2024, if you look at JRPGs, JRPGs had a massive year this year. You have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you have Metaphor, you have Persona 3 Reload, that's crazy. For horror games, we had Silent Hill 2 this year, which I will be talking about later. But like that was like it, at least for horror games for me. So this year definitely I think had some higher highs, but I think 2023 was more consistent. Just 'cause I think there was a little bit more variety when we're talking about genres across the board.
I kind of see it the opposite way in a sense where 2023 had a lot more higher highs where I think Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space and Alan Wake 2 were not overhyped, but extremely hyped to a point where they stood out more than most things around that time. And if you go back to when those games were coming out, the games that came out around those times, I can't remember specifically, but I just don't think they hit as well as the big shots, like the RE4s, like Dead Space Remastered and Alan Wake 2s. I think Gollum stands out a lot more than Concord for me, because Concord failed hard. I mean, it fell off the face of the earth, but and I think maybe this is part of Sony's doing, but I don't think about it as much. It just came and went for me. But Gollum stayed. Gollum was like, oh my God, it keeps getting worse. What is happening? I feel like the high highs and the low lows were at their peaks in 2023. And for me, 2024 was a lot more consistent. Might have been a little bit more middle of the road. The hype wasn't peaking and then dropping off. The hype was sort of like building up until the game's release and then sort of kept going. Like Space Marine 2 was, I'm not interested in this right now, but I'll see how it goes. And then it just kept getting better. Astrobot was, this looks really fun. I love the playroom, but let's see what this does. And it just kept getting better. I think for 2023, it was like, okay, that Harry Potter game is going to be good. RE4 is going to be good. Or I think there was a lot of questioning about RE4, but for a lot of people who were not fans of the originals and just kept buying the remakes because they were just serviceable, I think it was no question that it was just gonna be good. I think something like Dead Space was a bit more questionable as well because you're remaking something that was so loved. But for a lot of people, it's like, how do you mess that up? How do you do that wrong?
In RE4's case, it's like that was the one remake, especially after like Resident Evil 3 remake wasn't the best received. Like it was still a very high quality game, but when you get in the nitty gritty, you like compare it to it being a remake of 3, it's a whole thing. Like RE4 is, a lot of people consider it the best game ever made. And it came out in 2005. Like, that was the one remake they could not screw up. And I think in that, and being that it was from Capcom, I did think it was going to be, like, stellar because it had to be. And I was, I ended up being right on that.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, where we got better games and more consistently in 2023, but I think 2024 was just a lot more chill year where it was like you don't really have this FOMO every time a good game comes out because all of the other stuff coming out is just as good, if not reaching the bar, Yeah,
I can agree with you there.
And with that said, I think we should just get into our top 5 games that we've played this year, and I would suggest going from 5 to 1,
Yeah, we'll do that.
We can build this up a little bit. So
everyone loves a good old countdown.
Oh yeah, a little bit of anticipation, tittle them a little bit.
Coming in at my number 5 game of the year, speaking of RE4, is the original RE4. I had never played it before, and I had played it for the first time this year. Just kind of stating for the record, I keep a long, giant, list of my favorite games, and currently the RE4 remake, right now, in the year 2024, is my favorite game I've ever played. So
really,
I know. Yeah, RE4 remake is my favorite game of all time, and I love Resident Evil. I've just been fascinated with the series since I played RE7. I couldn't play horror games before that. Thought it would be a zombie game because I grew up with those shitty early 2000s Resident Evil movies. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do this just one day, and oh my God. I think I may have lost a couple of years off my life just from the stress of that first playthrough. But now I can play horror games, so it all worked out. Anyways, I wanted to go back and play the original RE4 this year. So I did. I played in like an hour and a half to 2 hours and hated it. I almost completely dropped it. I was like, maybe this just isn't for me. I don't think this holds up anymore. I didn't grow up with it. I wasn't there. The tank controls, everything was just weird and wasn't clicking for me. But instead, I took some time away from it and I came back to it. I kind of knew a little bit more of how, the game worked and when things were coming up so I could kind of better prepare resource-wise. Once I got back to where I was, I couldn't stop playing. I think of this when comparing it to the remake The remake, the plot comes second, and the characters really get to shine with the kind of new reworks they did to the story and how they flesh out the characters and the relationships and all that. That is my favorite part of the remake. The original, I think, focuses more on the plot above the characters. And while I don't think it's better than the remake, obviously, and I think there's 4 games I played this year that I think are better than it, the combat was super interesting. Like it's what kind of created the third person action. The game is all designed around it too, of not being able to shoot while you're moving. And it gives such a like arcadey experience. I've never played a game that felt like I was playing like a super arcadey kind of style game. And there's something that was just so satisfying about it. It was really interesting going back and, you know, having not liked it initially, having a very, very, very strong negative reaction to it, to kind of seeing why people have loved it and have talked so highly about it over the years, was like a super great experience. But at the end of the day, it's RE4 again, and I love RE4. I love the world. I love Leon. I love all the characters. I like the plot. It was just getting able to experience just like a different version of it was, I think, just worth the experience in itself.
Oh yeah, and I think the difference between the first and the second, not even having fully played the first, you exemplified perfectly, where the original focuses on plot and the second focuses on character, where I think I didn't really like that first one either. I don't like the original that much, and like you, I've only played about 2 hours of it, so that might be the issue here. But I think for me, the mechanics are specifically for that time period of gaming.
And it's specific to like RE4, which makes it so interesting. Like I have never played a single thing that feels like RE4. Never.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so unique. Like it kind of feels like that kind of arcade style where it is like super like addicting.
I am going to take your word for it and assume that it is original. I haven't played many games from around that time. Specifically, I've played games from the 90s and later in the 2000s, but that 2001 to sort of 2008 era of gaming for me is kind of a mystery. So dipping my toes into it is a little bit odd. So I was expecting the gameplay to be not my style of like third person shooters. I was expecting it to be a little bit clunkier than what I usually deal with. I was mainly, I think looking back on it now, disappointed with the story and what it focuses on, because at the start I'm thinking about Leon. Okay, this young guy is going into this town to deal with this situation. And instead of the original focusing, I guess it focuses on Leon obviously, but it doesn't focus enough for me. And I think that's where the remake kind of grabs you and pulls you a bit closer. Is like, okay, how is he going to figure out the solution to this situation, rather than in the original kind of having him experience the situation in front of him.
It's Leon, so like of course he's going to like get through it. Like they do kind of play a lot more. It's going to sound cliche, but Leon's inner struggles, the way they did it was just super captivating. I'm just a little goober when it comes to like well-written characters and stories.
Oh yeah. I think the original definitely has something to it. I unfortunately couldn't click with it in the same way that you said. Maybe there is still hope for me. Maybe I can come back to it and appreciate it as much as everybody else does. But I think the remake is, I think hands down, I'm okay with just having played that, at least for right now.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid.
My number 5, we're going to get right into it, is Persona 3 Reload. It's very colorful. The menus are astounding, and ever since I picked this game up, it is in my rotation, like my actual music rotation. I listen to it going to bed. I listen to it to wake up. I get sad, I listen to it. I get happy, I listen to it. What do
you watch, anime or something?
Wish,
dude.
That's honestly the biggest barrier for these games for me. Is I want to like anime, but so much of anime is like pushing me away. Like the high school aspect is not the greatest for me. I don't like reliving my own high school experience, and I don't like necessarily seeing children figure out the high school experience for themselves. And that's what Persona is, you know, you're dealing with high school relationships, teachers, groups, and stuff like that. And I never clicked with any of that. But you know, the scenario's already built out in front of you. You know, you're not going to, like, at least for the most part, get humiliated in front of everybody. So you don't have that much to lose. But replacing the real life trauma that comes with high school, you get the calendar system, because it takes the whole game takes place within a school year. I think the DLC expands on that further in like the summer or something, but I'm not exactly sure. But it takes place over the school year, and you have to dedicate time to certain tasks and certain side quests, and not just certain side quests, but specific people as well. You have to build certain relationships in order to strengthen aspects of your own character to help in battles later on. Dealing with those kind of relationships in real time is interesting, trying to figure out where to spend your time and what abilities to upgrade. You can focus on the pure connection that you have with this person and figuring out what the storyline is. So this person's storyline interests me more, so I'm going to focus on that. But there's also this person over here who doesn't necessarily have the best storyline, but gives you some better attributes later on. So I like that part of the calendar system, but then you have this battle system over here, apart from the calendar system, where you're sort of running through this procedurally generated dungeon, and you can attack enemies in real time, but most of the time that just leads into a turn-based system. That part is also another barrier for me because I'm not a huge turn-based guy, or at least not before this year. So learning about this game, seeing that, and knowing like, okay, the music is great, the visuals are impressive, and I kind of want to see where these characters go, but that turn-based mechanic system, I can't get past it. It's too Pokemon for me, and that's one of the worst aspects of Pokemon to me. But I think getting 10 to 12 hours with Persona 3 Reload and then hopping into another game, which I'll talk about later, this is my new Pokemon. If I look towards a turn-based RPG of some sort, it's not going to be Pokemon. It's going to be Persona, because it cuts out a lot of the sort of video game aspects where it's like, okay, you're catching a monster and you're upgrading a monster, where no, you're interacting with a human. Their personality traits are affecting you. Your personality traits have the chance to affect them. And through that, your bond strengthens. And it's sort of like, okay, obviously, if I talk to my grandfather more, I'm going to have a better connection with my grandfather. And then you go, shit, I really need to talk to my fucking grandfather. Oh my God. In this game, this soundtrack, the music and the presentation of the menus, because you spend a lot of your time in the menus, it really just gives you time to think about what you want to do, how you want to do it, and when you want to do it. And that carries on over into real life. So it's like, okay, I get time for Persona here, and then once I'm done with Persona, I'm going to call my grandfather real quick, and maybe we'll set something up for the weekend, and then maybe I'll talk to my mom or my brother, and then I'll go down to the corner store and I'll figure out what this guy's story is and stuff. You know, it makes you consider how you spend your time outside of the game as well, because it makes you realize how important time is, and also emphasizes the space in between that, where it's like, just enjoy yourself, just enjoy the music, just enjoy the vibe, don't worry about the time spent, just enjoy it. You know, build those relationships so you can later enjoy them and strengthen them. And Persona 3, man, it really gives that to you. It really does.
And that's your number 5? Oh, man, I can't even imagine what you're going to be getting into.
I can't give it anything more because I haven't played a ton of it. I've 10, 15 hours, but dude, it's like an 80-hour game. It's like 80 hours. So
fair enough.
Yeah. What's your number 4, Toby?
Coming in at number 4, I have the Silent Hill 2 remake.
Let's go. Let's go.
I finally got an emulator set up this year, and Silent Hill 2 was, you know, getting into survival horror. I always knew about Silent Hill 2, and I tried it on the emulator, and I'm still open to go back to it, but I don't really have the want or need to anymore, mostly because of Silent Hill 2 remake. I kind of got sidetracked and was like, you know what, I want to play the original Silent Hill 2 before the remake comes out, but I ended up kind of just getting sidetracked with other games and didn't get around to it. And I was waiting for Silent Hill 2 remake to come out, or at least getting closer to release, because if there was going to be a remake that would have failed hard and would have been colossal, it would have been Silent Hill 2 remake. A lot of people were very worried, and I was very skeptical. The first trailers that came out for it looked rough, and that's just putting it lightly. It was like we were constantly getting like lackluster or like bad news about this game, and Bloober Team didn't have the best reputation. But before this, they did like a lot of like walking sims, and personally, I haven't played any of their games besides Silent Hill 2, but they weren't reviewed the best. They weren't talked of very highly. They were just a studio that kept putting out horror games, and they were just fine. Some of them, people say, they weren't so great. We get into that. We get into, Konami, and they also don't have a good reputation. So it was like a lot of people went into the mindset of, wow, this game is doomed to fail. Because it was a remake of Silent Hill 2, I kept an eye on it, and it was something like, if it was good, or even if it was fine, like I was gonna play it. And then, the reviews came out. I think it started with like an 87 on Metacritic. It was so strange because at that time when it came out, it was like everyone was like, hold on, could this be peak? Could this be like the remake that this game has needed and like deserves? And at least in my opinion, I think it totally delivered. Atmosphere is absolutely stellar. This is probably one of the scariest, if not the scariest game I have ever played. The way they pace things, it's about, I think, double the length of the original. I didn't mind it because the way they pace the game, they make you stay in environments, and it builds this like hours of unease. I have never had this happen to me before, and this might sound so bizarre, but like I was playing for kind of longer play sessions, and there was one closer to the end of the game where you're in this like underground prison, and as I was like getting through it, like I was getting like literally sick to my stomach with how much like anxiety and like stress it was causing.
Dude, I love that.
It was such an odd experience. I don't get that with games like Silent Hill 2. I would say I was a lot more scared during Resident Evil 7, but this just gave me like, it was just like so uneasy. Another huge thing I will give for this game, Luke Roberts was robbed of best performance of this year at the Game Awards. The way he portrays James is just so fantastic. He absolutely acted his ass off. The combat too is like fun and fine, and just getting to explore the world of Silent Hill and going into it for the first time and getting to witness that story for the first time was just like very, very special, especially coming into a game where like even hardcore fans of the game didn't believe in it, and we had like every reason to, but Bloober Team completely came in and just delivered, and it was really great to see. Next year they're releasing a game called Chronos: The New Dawn, and I will be there day one. So
interesting.
I'm just excited. I think this is definitely a new era for Bloober Team, and I think it's also a new era for Silent Hill as well. I think a lot of people would argue it's like the first amazing Silent Hill game since like the original trilogy in the early 2000s. So yeah, I think this game overall was just a massive win and was one of the most memorable experiences from the year for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Silent Hill 2 is going to do for Silent Hill what Resident Evil 7 did for Resident Evil.
I sure hope so.
It looks amazing. Also, Bloober Team, shout out to them, because I've looked at what they've made, and none of it's really bad, but it's all kind of just like they needed that kick to be like, okay, this means something to more people than just the people in this room, so we're gonna make it great. I feel like that shined through with this one. But
there's a quote that I want to bring up really quick before we move on.
Yeah, no problem.
Did you hear the statement from Bloober Team? Okay, so here's, I think, let me see. This article I just pulled up. They came out and said that they are done making quote unquote shitty games.
Oh, okay.
Did you?
So you know what? I actually saw the game that you're talking about, like the reveal trailer with like them playing chess, I believe.
Yeah.
That does look kind of cool. I think that's funny though. I'm looking on. We're done making shitty games.
Yeah, like it was funny. It was a very funny moment, but like, I mean, after Silent Hill 2, I mean, I think I don't know if I'm ever gonna yeah, I just thought it was very funny, and it was like, that's what a lot of people were like saying, and they were like, we're done.
It's a very human thing to do.
Yeah,
after releasing such a good game.
It was a moment of like humility.
To the team, but like also this is a change for the team.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was just funny. It was very honest. Like yeah. I just
something you don't
think
get
that was funny.
From the industry a lot. My number 4 is gonna have to be Balatro. And
Oh, okay.
I wanted to change this out with the number 2 pick,
Oh
but
my God.
my number 2 pick has got like so many more hours, I think.
Okay.
But Balatro, most people know about it. It was all over the Game of the Year awards. It's a huge guilty pleasure for me. If I don't look at the clock while I'm playing every 10 minutes, I'm going to be in there for 3 hours at least.
That's what I've heard. I've heard once you get into the game, it just consumes you.
Oh yeah, I will say I've probably learned how to play poker like 3 times throughout my life, and it didn't hit until the 4th time when I started playing Balatro. It actually made me consider poker as like a fun, entertaining game. You know what? I
Wow.
lied. Red Dead Redemption 2, I played a lot of poker in that game because I was fully immersed in that world. But even then I forgot how to play poker. But Balatro now, if I sat down to play poker with some friends, I would know because of Balatro.
You've heard it here first. Nelly is now a gambler.
I think that's another great thing about this game too, is because it gives you the same kind of dopamine. As a whole package, it kind of considers that aspect of itself. Throughout the music, I mean, the bonus multipliers that you get when I think it's your chips and your multipliers start to burn when you've accumulated enough points and it keeps going, like that kind of feeling that you get from just owning at the game is very satisfying. The sound that it gives, the music that's already playing. I don't know if you've come across videos about this, Toby, but I think you'd be interested in this, and just the music that Balatro contains. I think it's one track. I think it's a 15-minute track, and I think it's on loop. And it goes through like 4 different variations. Just so time-bending and mind-warping. The music is sort of egging you on, like, yeah, you can get the next blind. You are going to be able to make it. But then you get to that next blind, and you start to realize, ooh, I'm in over my head here. And you go, okay, you can copy your seed. So Balatro is a roguelike. You start a new game every time you jump in, and it's a random seed every time. And in Balatro, you can copy those seeds, and you can replay them.
Oh.
And it's very interesting because there's a whole community behind these seeds on Reddit where it's like, okay, you go to the 4th blind, you pick up this Joker, and you keep going. And I'm not going to tell you anything past that because it gets crazy after that. So just keep going and tell everybody how far you went. And that aspect of the game is awesome too. I haven't played enough of it because it is one of those games that a lot of these games for me is just like, if I pick this up, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. If I told myself I'm playing Balatro tomorrow, I'm waking up and I'm playing Balatro tomorrow. There's no
And
ifs,
it was
ands, or
all
buts
made
about
by
it.
one person, which is just crazy.
One person. And I have to look. I'm sorry that I don't know who this person is off the top of my head. But they also didn't accept their award at the Game Awards. I mean, they did, kind of. And I think they were even there. But they had someone else, the publisher, accept it. But their name, I forget their name. Local Thunk.
Okay.
We don't know their actual name. I don't think we've seen a picture of their face. And that's, nobody wants to, because the person doesn't want to be known. It's sort of like a Flappy Bird situation where the person doesn't necessarily hate the thing that they created. They're just like, I don't need the spotlight. The game's good. The reception is great. I'm cool where I'm at right now. It's got a lot of sales, which is great. It was the talk of the town
sales.
at the Game of the Year awards. So that was beautiful. But the actual gameplay of itself is like, this is a game that I'm going to be thinking about in my library for the rest of my life, where it's like, this is a game that I'm going to be playing for the rest of my life, but it's a retirement game. I'm going to retire and immediately get on Balatro and probably play it until I die.
Hell yeah.
Oh my God. Unless Balatro 2 comes out. Balatro 2.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's my number 4. Great visuals. It's got that CRT aesthetic that you can add on to it. It's retro as fuck, and it also runs great on the Steam Deck, obviously. It's amazing. It's a beautiful game. But Toby, what is your number 3?
Coming in at my number 3 for the year, sadly it only made your honorable mention, but that's besides the point, is Control.
Great game. Great game.
Yeah, he says very unenthusiastically.
I don't have the Control, soundtrack on replay. For most of these, I've gone out of my way to listen to their music, like I don't do that for every game.
All right. Anyways, okay. Wait, did you say you don't listen to the Control soundtrack on repeat?
No, I do
Okay,
not.
all right. Yeah, we're gonna. This is blasphemy, but anyways, Alan Wake 2 was my first Remedy game. And in the year 2024, Alan Wake 2 is my second favorite game. 2023 had some bangers for me. But Alan Wake 2, got me interested in Remedy. Alan Wake 2 is a very Remedy game. Like, I loved the game, like, separately from Remedy. It was just such a unique experience. It got me interested in the studio, but Control is what made me a diehard Remedy fan.
Interesting.
The game is so unique, and it's kind of like Stellar Blade to me, where it does kind of feel like an amalgamation of stuff, mostly in like the gameplay mechanics that are in Control. When you like look at them like on a very surface level, there is a very bare bones like skill tree. Even like the HUD, it just kind of looks like, again, I want to say a very surface level, like it does look a little generic. But I think in that, the way it just goes off the rails and you learn like all of like the technical terms and stuff for everything in this Remedy connected universe they're doing, and it's kind of unraveled, is just such a unique experience. There is like such mystery behind it, and not to mention the powers you get throughout too, and how they change up gameplay, and you just become like an insane like superhero with like evil residents all around. Like I really can't think of like a good way to simplify Control, but the story is mysterious and it's interesting, and it leaves a lot of questions for the eventual Control 2 sequel that we are going to get a Control 2 of, kind of where they're going to go from there, how it ties into Alan Wake, and just kind of getting like this seemingly like small bite of like what they can do down the road with everything that was established in Control. And it gives such like this era of awe and mystery behind the game and the game's story, and it's just really, it's very fun and just easy to play. Story is so Remedy, and I really don't have any other way to describe it. If you played a Remedy game, like like if we really were to get into it, I could delve very deep in Control. Everything that like just added to the game. I think it's definitely a game that is greater than the sum of its parts, and was my third favorite game from the year.
Oh yeah, I mean, greater than the sum of its part is an apt assessment for that game. I think it's the most recommendable Remedy game in my opinion. You're right.
I'd say you'd be correct. Yeah.
I think I don't want to give any like shade to the game. I don't mean this in a bad way, but the presentation
Watch your
is
next words carefully.
The presentation is very simple and understandable. I think for broader audiences, Control is a lot better at grabbing people, pulling them in, and sort of capturing them.
It's
like,
so
this
interesting.
is the void, and they want to stare at it. That for me, a lot of Remedy games is just what's gonna come out of the void. I'm staring at it. What's coming at me? And
Exactly.
Control is just a lot more like
here's
the
this
mirror,
evil refrigerator
or an evil mirror, or it doesn't take much work to set you in the environment, because the environment, it just captures you just by being there. And then peels back the layers for you.
If I could simplify it, I think what makes Control so interesting and so great is it takes the ordinary and makes it inordinary. And I think, I just think that kind of the angle that it takes is so interesting, and has quickly became one of my favorite games.
It was tough putting it in the honorable mention slot.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was very difficult.
It is like, unlike most of these games on this list, I have completed it. I have played it. I've played all the DLC as well. It's a great game. I'd give it an 8. I'd give it a solid 8.
Well, Nelly, I'd give it a 9. So
unfortunately, it doesn't reach 9 to me. It just doesn't get there. I love the aspect, the accessibility of it, where you can make yourself basically Superman. I think that was very fucking fun. And I think that was a huge part of why I stayed with the game, because maybe I'm just not good at games, but it was kind of difficult towards the end.
Yeah,
like, okay,
it definitely got a little bit harder at the end.
Give me a fucking break. All right, what is this queue again? Okay. How long does that take? All right. How much damage? Okay. So being able to tweak how much damage I took, how much damage I dealt, how often I could, spoiler alert, fly for, was great. I love that. I basically became Superman in that game, and it was fun. It helped put the story at the forefront and understand it a lot more, because the more I got into that game, the more and more the story got away from me, and more I had to focus on being good at the game, which is, I know for some people, great when it comes to like From Software games and stuff like that. That's cool. I don't know if I like it for a Remedy game. But
Nelly, what is your number 3?
my number 3 would have to be Metaphor Refantasio.
I knew it was
my
coming for you.
God.
I just didn't know where.
Oh, I'm about 25 hours in.
Jesus.
I'm nowhere near the end, but it is another game
right.
that I can sink hours into. If I do not look at the clock, I will be lost. And
Hell yeah.
unlike Balatro or Vampire Survivors, until I got the Steam Deck, I couldn't just put it down, because the way you save in that game is very particular. You can only do it at certain spots and certain dungeons, and the dungeons take a while. They're fun. They're diverse in their presentation, but they're not too diverse in like their layouts. They kind of feel generated in a sense. I think the first thing that got me interested into this game was the music. I heard someone talk about it on YouTube, and I kind of gave it a second glance. It was like, not for me. But then the music started, the battle theme for this song. I'm pretty sure most people have heard it by now, but it's so captivating and it builds so well. In the release that you get after the build it's gratifying. It's meant to be like a triumphant type of theme. It's more of like we're all collectively benefiting from the success that we're experiencing right now. A lot of the game has to do with, you can't have it all. You can't. That's just not possible. But metaphorically speaking, we can. We can. See? We can. We can at least try. We can at least try and connect with as many people as possible. And it's an Atlas game, so it does a lot of the same things that Persona does. So it deals with time. You have time management. You have people and relationships that you can build to strengthen abilities and whatnot. But for this game, specifically for Atlas fans, it adds a lot of new elements, a lot of new, even designs in general. I think Persona 5 and Shin Megami Tensei 5 were the last Atlas games that came out, other than Persona 3, which was a remake. Persona 5 and Shin Megami Tensei 5 both used a lot of the same assets throughout a lot of those games. And those games came out like 2-3 times for people. That was getting kind of grating, just seeing a lot of the same stuff over and over again. But this was a chance for Atlas to really spread its wings, to really delve into like a different aspect of fantasy. It's very flashy, it's very gaudy, it's bombastic to a certain extent. And that works great for the art direction. I think it performs very poorly.
I've heard it's not very well optimized.
It should run at 60 FPS on the Steam Deck. It might run at 60 FPS on the PS5 now, but when I played the demo, it didn't. Playing on Steam Deck now, it doesn't. And it's so unfair because the game is beautiful, yes, but it's also clearly so low res. Like, there should be a lot more headroom for this game to perform. But it seems pegged on like every system that it runs on. And it's unfortunate because yes, the game is great. Yes, the game is big and long, but you're not really adventuring like you're doing in something like Final Fantasy, where you're not going into a town and exploring the shops in the town and stuff like that. You are, but the shops in Metaphor are just people. They've got a little shop behind them that's almost in the style of like what you would see in maybe like a Zelda game or something.
Okay.
But you're just buying from a person. You're not going into a shop and looking around at stuff. You're going up to someone and you're talking to them and you're looking through a menu. And the menus are great. The menus are beautiful. But I think that's a huge sticking point for me for this game. Not why it's not higher on this list, but I think something that needs to have more attention brought onto it, because a lot of people love this game and a lot of people are happy for success, like myself, but a lot of people are making excuses for it at the same time. Excuses that don't need to be there. This can be running so much better. A lot more people should be able to play this game, but just simply cannot because the optimization wasn't there. But it's a beautiful game. The story's amazing. The character relationships that you build in order to gain certain attributes and to level up better, and the goal that you're actually after is much more interesting and much more, in my opinion, developed than something like a Persona game, because there's only so much you can do in that high school aspect. If you sort of get out of that and you start focusing on, someone in a shop that has no relation to the school, it sort of feels like they're sort of breaking the mold a bit in that high school setting. It's like, okay, you can talk to old people, but the main focus is the school. I'm not really worried about people who don't have to do with the school. But in Metaphor, you're trying to get everybody on your side to a certain extent. You're trying to do the most good for the most people in order to gain the most respect, in order to gain the highest position if all else fails. You're trying to be the best. And a lot of it's metaphors. That's why the name, at least in my opinion, is so good. A lot of people don't like that name. A lot of people didn't like it right off the bat. And I kind of fucked with it right away. It just, the RPG elements, the turn-based aspects of it kept me from sort of getting on board with it right away. But I tried out Persona 3 before that. It hooked me, and I knew that the music and everything was going to be on replay for a while. So getting into that game on day one and being able to play that demo beforehand, it's changed how I look at gaming. It's changed the games that I want to play. It's changed how I look at my life, how I want to interact with the people around me. And a lot of great art has done that this year, but Metaphor specifically. It's going to sound weird when I talk about my number one and number two, because they're a lot more personal and don't affect my life outside of games. But I think that carries these Atlas games so hard for me, is that they actually take me out of the game and go, okay, look at your life now. What can you be doing better? And I think that is huge for Metaphor, and it does it so much better than any other Persona game.
Nelly, are you ready for my number two?
I am bracing myself. What is it, my friend?
You're bracing yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Well, spoiler alert, it came out this year. Ooh, okay. There's your number one. Number two, okay.
Came out this year.
Number two, it is my game of the year for games that came out this year. And Nelly, one more thing.
I think I know what you're talking about.
One more thing, all right? It actually won Game of the Year. It's Astrobot.
Yeah,
it's Astrobot.
Tell us about it.
This game is so interesting. It's fun. It's whimsical. It's well designed. It runs really well. It's gotten me interested in platformers. It's just a video game, not sponsored, but backlogged.com. I go and I log every game I play and review everything. A really fun website. Definitely give it a look. It is.
What is it again?
Backlogged.com.
Gotcha.
It's like social media for games and game review. I'll just read my review, and I think it paints a really good picture, just kind of how I view this game and why it's one of my favorite games. Spoiler alert, it's in my top 5 favorite games of all time. I would consider this game a 10 out of 10. Here is my review from right after I finished the game on September 13th, 2024. I can log all these details. It's great. Check it out. Astrobot was such a joy. The game never overstays its welcome and always finds ways to keep levels engaging and dynamic. The cameo levels and bots were also a great addition, especially as someone familiar with legacy PlayStation IP. And the most important part, it's just a damn good video game. When you really just break it down, it's just a fun thing to go in and experience. My roommate just platinumed the game. I think he did that in less than a week. And my girlfriend, who doesn't play a ton of games, but she does like to come in and finds games she's interested in, and we talk about it. I think she's downstairs right now actually playing Astrobot. Astrobot has bridged such an interesting gap where it's just like this fun experience that kind of just has drawn everyone in. I mean, it won Game of the Year. I know people are complaining about it, which is its whole other thing. I think it really did deserve it. I mean, when they talked about it at the Game Award, they just went in and designed a really fun experience that just brings joy. And that's what Astrobot is. Collecting those cameo bots is like crack. I swear to God. Seeing, Kratos from God of War, seeing Dante from Devil May Cry, the Resident Evil characters. They just added some newer, IPs. You got your Helldivers in there. You got your Eve from Stellar Blade, Spider-Man, and Spider-Man. Both of them chilling there. You've got stuff from the PlayStation 1. What was the monkey game where you catch those monkeys? I don't know why I know it. Ape Escape. That's the first cameo level, and you get to see that. So it's just like this. I know some people have complained where it's like, oh, this is just like feels like advertising for PlayStation IP. This game, when it comes down to it, and how I view this game, it celebrates games and gaming culture while being a great video game itself. It's cute. Astrobot is adorable. I love it. It's a game I definitely want to go back and, platinum eventually, but when it comes down to it, I can't think of anything I would want differently. It's well paced. It's engaging. It uses the PlayStation controller and the haptic feedback better than any game I played on the PlayStation 5. It just knows what it wants to do and does it, in my opinion, just completely flawlessly.
And it won Game of the Year for a reason. I haven't played it myself yet, but there's clearly a time and place that I will find for this game and give it its flowers and whatnot. But I think that's a great review. I think you put it perfectly. I think we'll move into my number 2 now. We'll kind of speed things up a bit. I won't talk much about this game because there isn't much to it, but it's Vampire Survivors. I think it hits all the same notes that Balatro does for me.
I've also heard if I start playing this game, I won't stop playing it, which is why I have avoided it.
And you've probably heard it from me every time I pick it up because, dear God, I can't stop picking it up. More so than Balatro.
About this, and I do know it came out with a Castlevania DLC, which is the closest I've ever come to picking it up. But I think for games that are time sinks, I try to avoid those, but I will hear them from afar, specifically from you.
I cannot blame you. I won't tell people that they're missing out on this game, even though that they are. It's just one of those games that is never ending. I mean, there is an ending, I believe. There is a point to which you can, unlock everything. It's not completely endless, but there's endless hours. There's just so much you can do. I think it's another roguelike. You can pick your character who has a specific weapon that you can level up, but you aren't just restricted to that weapon throughout. You can collect more weapons, and you can also collect abilities that pair with those weapons that when you max those weapon upgrades out, they become a new, more powerful weapon, and you can keep upgrading them after that. There's like 15 different maps at which you unlock throughout playing, and then you can go back to those maps with each character and unlock specific characters that unlock more powerful weapons quicker, so you can start the game out with those more powerful weapons. There's an endless amount of combinations that you can do in this game, and almost every character has an interesting aspect. Like there's a garlic character that's slow but emits garlic around itself, so it's sort of like an area of effect to where anything that comes close gets slightly damaged. And on certain maps,
sounds insane.
It's amazing. It's so fun, and that's not the only weapon that you get. My favorite, personally, is the person with the guns. So when you get the guns, they shoot like blue and red dots, but the way it shoots is like at like an X, like a cross. So you're shooting 4 at a time. First of all, you can double them, and once you double it up, you're shooting 8 at a time. So that's already double the damage. But then once you upgrade that weapon to its max, it becomes like this constant star effect emitting out from your character, which is pretty cool. But if you doubled it up beforehand, you still get those bullets. The amount of combinations like that are endless, and I kind of want to experience them all. It's not the most beautiful game, but it has introduced me to Castlevania. That Castlevania DLC is also kind of cool. There's some controversy around it that eventually led to Castlevania DLC because I think a lot of the assets, some people considered straight rips from Castlevania.
It was definitely inspired from Castlevania.
Yeah, it released on PS4 and PS5 this year, I believe. So another great Steam Deck game. Funny because it gets the best battery out of the Steam Deck, out of any game that I play.
Makes
but
sense.
It's the one I play until my Steam Deck is dead. Like if I pick something else up, I'm probably going to put the Steam Deck down beforehand. But Vampire Survivors, it's like 4 hours straight of just playing, and I only can do that like once a week now.
Yeah.
If that, but oh my gosh, is it so fun. It's my number 2 game of the year that I played this year. I love turning my brain off and going for all of the other characters that I haven't unlocked yet, trying to beat personal records and whatnot. But Toby, I think we're here. Did we already mention your honorable mention?
Stellar Blade. It would have taken the number 5 spot, but the difficulty spike at the end, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Just brutal. I literally had to call out of work. Granted, that was my fault. I was basically banging my head against a brick wall. Stellar Blade it's just a really, really great video game, and it gets me really excited to kind of see what that, definitely a studio shift up is on my radar now. really great world. Even if the story isn't told the best, everything they created and kind of the aura around it is just great.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's get into number one now. What's your number one pick for the year that you've played?
My number one pick, Nelly, it's pretty basic, but it's Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
I started it in 2023, but really I didn't really do much in my playthrough. It was just like the first couple of levels and I didn't pick it back up. I had some health stuff I was going through very beginning of 2024, and I ended up being on medical leave for 2 months, and I wasn't doing much. I had a lot of time, so I knew I wanted to, play some games. Before this, I had, the people I live with were playing Baldur's Gate a lot more. They had kind of surpassed where I was at. I was around it. I was exposed to Baldur's Gate 3 a lot. And granted, I still am now, even though my playthrough is long done. It still is played in my house at least once a week. With all that being said, I knew it was going to be a major time sink, which is why I kind of stopped playing it and kind of put it down for a while. But I was like, hey, I have the time to play this. I might as well play it. Leading up to that, I had never really been interested in turn-based games. I think you were talking about that, and I think it's the Atlas games that have kind of gotten you more open to it. The reason I picked up Baldur's Gate and decided to play it in the first place was because it is based off of D&D. I've played a couple of campaigns and stuff through the years, and it's just super fun. There's nothing really like it. And Baldur's Gate 3 just transfers that tabletop experience into the game so well and a lot better than I would have expected it. And it does it better than what little I've played of, the first Baldur's Gate. Once I picked it up and actually started being like, okay, I'm going to play this to completion, I sped through it. I looked at my PlayStation year in review on my account and I put 95 hours into Baldur's Gate 3 in March alone. I picked it back up in March and finished it by the end of the month. The best way I can describe it is it captures the feel of D&D so well, where it's like I really felt like I went on a journey, especially like with the characters. They're entertaining, they're pretty well written. It was the first game that really got me to actually roleplay. I think the biggest thing that was difficult for me was getting used to the turn-based combat, as it kind of was my first game that, really forced me to strategize in that way. And there were definitely some difficult parts. Like there was the big boss fight of Act 2. The only reason I got through it was because my game glitched out. There was some mechanics that a specific character was able to get past, and that really helped me out. But then learning how to play a game that was so different than anything I've played before in that kind of turn-based style, but then absolutely like falling in love with it. It is easily the longest game I've ever played, and I plan on doing a
very, very interesting
a Dark Urge playthrough next year. There's supposed to be a big patch where they add, I think it's 12 new subclasses. Also, Baldur's Gate 3, everyone knows how good Baldur's Gate 3 is. It won Game of the Year last year, and all the cool updates they've done, all the mod support. It's a game that the studio wanted to make and clearly had so much love for it, and it's just felt in every ounce of the experience. There's so much you can do in it. Like if you think of, oh well, could I do this? Yeah, you can in Baldur's Gate 3. And I think a lot of games say that, especially leading up to where it's like, oh, look at all the cool things you can do, like, oh, we have this many endings. But Baldur's Gate 3 really means business. The game is one of the few games where it's talked of so highly, but I think deserves absolutely every ounce of it. And I think it's a game that studios, especially studios that want to make an RPG, I think that Baldur's Gate 3 is absolutely the gold standard.
What a beautiful synopsis. I think it's very telling for both of our number ones, where you talk about how Baldur's Gate got you to one of the first games that got you to roleplay, and also how many hours you put into it just in March alone was insane. Like you picked it up at one point and you kind of put it down because you realized you didn't have enough time for it, and then when you had enough time for it, you came back to it, and boy, does that mirror my number one.
Do you have any honorable mentions you wanted to touch on? I know you said that Control was one of them. Do you have any other ones you want to go over briefly?
Yeah, Control mainly because it got me, it made me realize like Alan Wake didn't get me, but Control was right there waiting for me to pull me into the Remedy universe. And like you said, just very mundane things like that sticky note room where it's like, okay, you use sticky notes to remind yourself about stuff. But
for those who know,
oh yeah. You know too much. Yeah, that game is great. I think honorable mentions, I've got a couple. Helldivers 2, I put a lot of time into that right at the
I put
start.
a little bit of time into that game.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seemed like they were just trying to create an experience that the game wasn't meant for, and they kind of had to walk it back later into the year. It's gotten great reception since. There's still a lot of people playing it. It's still very highly regarded. The people who I was playing with at the time, they don't really play it anymore, so I'm
not much of a live service guy.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was one of those last few games that really was like, maybe I am a live service guy, but no. I think Marvel Rivals is kind of doing that to me as well, but I'm not putting nearly as much time in Marvel Rivals as it was Helldivers 2. Jedi Fallen Order was a good one. I completed that. I think I gave it a 7 because it's really fun. It does really cool things with Star Wars, and you could tell genuine Star Wars fans, not haters, fans made that game. I picked the sequel up on PlayStation. It hasn't captured me like the first one has, but we'll see. GTA 5, finally playing that. Another honorable mention.
I picked it up this year. I'm hoping. I will never make any promises when it comes to getting through games, but I want to finish that. Play through the story content before GTA 6 comes out.
Oh, yeah. I've put maybe like 40 hours into the story. I'm pretty close to the end. If I just sat down one weekend, I could complete it. But I don't really remember a lot from my playthrough. That's the only issue. I remember a lot of Trevor stuff. I had a lot of fun with Trevor, but everything else.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. I get you.
Yeah, I think with that being said, I'm gonna get right into my number one spot, and it's got to be. I don't know what it is.
It's Cyberpunk. Okay.
It's
all right.
Let me just back this up. I bought it close to launch, early 2021. It ran well on my computer at the time. i5 12600K, RTX 3060. No game-breaking bugs at the time. It might have only been because I played it for about 2 hours. I played it up until the point where you get to the penthouse, where Act 1 really kicks off and pushes you into Act 2. And I didn't really finish that out because the penthouse mission is just, you're working as like cybersecurity. And you're figuring out clues, and that stuff just isn't very interesting to me, especially in like a first person setting. But I came back to it this year, and I came back to it because I am a new father. I had a child. And Toby, you know this already, but this is news for everybody else. I'm a dad now. And when you become a dad, it's working and dad. And so whatever comes after that is sort of like, whatever. I haven't really gotten into Balatro at that time, nor I think Vampire Survivors was just coming out on PS4 or PS5, but it wasn't on my radar. But Cyberpunk was sitting there waiting for me, just like, I think it got like a 2.1 update at some point, and that sort of spurred my love for it. And I played through that first beginning 2 hours. It was about as exciting as it was that first time, but straight into Act 2, it was compelling. I was pulled right in every night, and you can ask the people that were around me at the time. Every night I was going to Night City. I wasn't going to play Cyberpunk. I was going to Night City. I was going to my V, and I was going to talk to those characters. I was having interactions. I was building a relationship with certain characters, and I was being offered relationships by other characters where I was like, actually, no, my character doesn't really do well with your personality. So we're going to keep this kind of amicable. We'll do this together, but we're not really going to go any further than that. And I think the game is ultimately pushing you towards one specific, fully thought out relationship, like a full healthy relationship that isn't just sort of like a hookup or something. That's the one that I ended up with, but it's not because I knew that. It's because I wanted that relationship with my V. Just thinking about it, and that's how beautiful the game is. The music is also amazing. That's another, not nearly as much as those Atlas games, but also in my soundtrack playlist now, just every once in a while, I'm like, this is amazing. I gotta play Cyberpunk again. The side missions, Keanu Reeves in that
Silverhand,
game.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I will say the only part that didn't excite me in the way that the beginning didn't was later on into the story. Honestly, like 80 hours in, because I finally looked at the clock. I'm like, how fucking long have I had in this playthrough? But I was playing as, I think Johnny took over my body, and spoilers alert, Johnny's in a band, and you're trying to get the band back together so he can play with them one more time. And it was in one of
What?
those conversations. Yeah, it was in one of those conversations where I was just sort of like,
That's batshit.
yeah, he in explaining it through the whole story, he's taking over your V's body more and more. So the more and more it happens, it's sort of like, okay, this is routine. We're just going to let it run its course. And I was at that point where it was like, okay, I've explained this same situation to many other people. And this character specifically that I'm talking to, I'm not really interested in. I don't care for how I had to get to them, what it took to talk to them. I didn't like the mission structure. And once I finally got to sit down and got a breather, I sort of looked at the clock and it was like 85 hours in. And I've never played a game like Metaphor right now. I'm checking like, okay, I'm 10 hours in, I'm 13, 17, 20 hours in. Cyberpunk, I didn't, because I wasn't playing Cyberpunk. I was in Night City. I was playing I was my V. And I think the way that playthrough worked out, where at the start you're thrown into the open world and you're met with a boxer. I forget the boxer's name, but he has you spar with his robot. And if you beat the robot, which is pretty easy, he gives you a mission to where throughout your game, you can run into other boxers around the city. You can box them and level up through that. You can get eddies through that. And so that kind of pushed me towards a melee build. And there's two different types of melees in this game, where it's like knife melee, but also blunt melee. So sharp and blunt. I went with the blunt melee and it was great. I was slamming people. I was decking people. It was fun. I kept getting faster because my mobility was starting to be focused. You know, I had to get to people quicker. And all of this culminated into me fully embracing all of the like exploration mechanics that you can level up into, like the double jump, the boost that you can like propel yourself for a short distance. So I was out in the desert doing all of this, just exploring, and I came across like a mountain. The way you could get down this mountain, you had to like run in opposite directions for quite a long time. In game, it would probably only taken me like 3 minutes, but I didn't have that kind of time. I wanted to just get down the mountain. So what I did was I double jumped my way down the mountain. And at a certain point, you run into a weapon. And Toby, when I tell you this weapon changed the way that I played this game for the better, it changed the way that I played this game for the better. It was, I picked up a dildo. I picked up a fucking dildo, my man. And
what?
It vibrated in game. You could slap people across the face with it. You could slam people with it.
What?
You could stab people with it. It vibrated your own controller. So my whole playthrough had been basically built up to this moment where I get this dildo and the rest of the game is just God mode. I'm slapping everybody around.
Well,
every mission is like stealth. Nope. It allowed me to just really focus on the story and have so much fun everywhere else. I like the hacking. It got a lot easier. 2.0 did some amazing things to this game. And I don't think I would play it if it weren't for 2.0, because some of the upgrade trees and all of that just very convoluted at the start, to me at least. But the system is a lot more streamlined, for better or worse. I love it. It's a lot easier to digest. It's a lot easier to plan your gameplay. Like, okay, I want to eventually get to be this kind of character, and you can see what you need to do. Before, you really couldn't. You kind of had to take it step by step. Okay, now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do this. The ending had me crying, and it's one of the reasons why I haven't really started Phantom Liberty yet, because the ending was so good where it stopped. I didn't want to get back into it. I didn't want to ruin that for me. So I've started a second playthrough, gone through the first 2 hours, those first excruciating 2 hours, and I'm in Act 2 now, where it all started to kick off for me again, and it's happening again. It's taking over my life. I want to go back to Night City. I want to get to Phantom Liberty and experience that. I've spent too long talking about it already, but it is just an amazing game. It is still not a 10 out of 10.
Oh, okay. Baldur's Gate 3 and Astrobot are 10 out of 10s for me. So that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. This game and God of War 2018 have done things to me as a person that no other game has, but they're still not 10 out of 10s. I really feel like maybe this is just me at this particular point of time in my life, but there can be no more than 3 10 out of 10s. And I think one of them is already Red Dead Redemption 2. So I hope the sequel to Cyberpunk gets up there. They really don't have to do much. They really have to do very little to make this system of mechanics in storytelling a complete 10 out of 10, because there were moments
maybe just not fuck up your launch.
Yeah, true.
Release
True
with
as shit.
2.0.
Yeah, or at least do what, Baldur's Gate did and early access that shit. Get community feedback, learn what people are sticking to and what's not. I feel like that could have ruined the experience that was Cyberpunk 2077, but ultimately I think it would have done a lot better now, seeing, because Path of Exile 2 is out in early access and people are loving that. They've got their criticisms, but they're still loving it. And they paid to play that early. That's ridiculous. Yeah, I think that launch was definitely hurt it. And if that 2.0 didn't make the moves it did, it would not be on my radar. I would have been $60 wasted. But it is now, I've gotten well more than $60 out of that game. So thank you for the team that worked on that. Thank you for the team that kept working on that and keeps working on that. They just got an update that added a ton of tiny stuff, but one main feature is that you can now, in the photo mode, there's a ton of other features in the photo mode, but if you take a picture, you can now add those pictures to your V's apartment. So the various apartments around the city,
that's what I heard.
You can take pictures throughout your journey and then put them in your apartment to see later on, which other games have done before, but it just adds to that. Oh, that moment right there. We did that the other day. That was so sweet. Maybe I should have another date with this person, which is, oh my gosh. I just thinking about it. I love it. I love video games, but I love Cyberpunk. I love Cyberpunk so much.
I'm about 4 hours into my playthrough. I kind of did what I did with Baldur's Gate 3, where I got into it past the intro bit, and then I put it down. So I think Cyberpunk will have to be a priority for me next year.
Cyberpunk was a great game, and it is unfortunately one that I missed out on when it came out. And that seems to be a theme with me, and I'm sure a lot of other people watching. I think now's a great time to go over some of the games that we missed this year and definitely want to get to up and coming. I think I'll start definitely up there. Came out around the same time as Astrobot and kind of got drowned out by it, but it's Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. I think this game looks beautiful. It gives 360 vibes. It's there. I want to be there, but I'm not, and it makes me sad. Elden Ring, Erdtree makes me want to get into Elden Ring, as well as something we'll talk about later. UFO 50 was another indie game that came out this year. It's like 50 smaller games all about a company that doesn't exist, but the lore is just so sweet and titillating that I wanna get in there, and the games seem fun too. There's probably like 15 really good games, and the rest are kind of serviceable. None of them are bad, I've heard. So that's another one. Neva, a beautiful storytelling experience.
I've been curious about that one.
Yes, dude. I think it's like a side scroller platformer where you are with your dog companion and you're both like trying to protect each other and help each other throughout. It gets very emotional, very high highs, very low lows, and it's just a very beautiful game for storytelling. I think my last little bit here has to be focused on, I know earlier I said I'm not a Pokemon guy anymore. Persona has taken that spot, but I have had my eye on The Smith Plays Pokemon. He and his team have made a couple of ROMs this year, and I think into last year as well. They've updated Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Silver, and Pokemon Emerald. Apparently those are all fun, great renditions of classic Pokemon games that are free for anybody who has those games available to them already, and they're easy to emulate. So I'm probably going to be playing those at some point next year. I really like what him and his team have done to those games. They've made them a lot more accessible and there's more of a community around them now. So when I get to them, I can have people to talk about them with. So I think that's fun.
Well, for me, this year, I actually did a pretty good job of playing the big releases that I was interested in at the time and was able to get through them and play them. But there was two exceptions to that rule for various reasons. Black Myth Wukong released, I would have bought this game at launch. I would have, but it didn't get a physical release. I got mine on the day we're recording this. It released 8 days ago, so I haven't had a chance to get to it yet, but it is sitting on my shelf waiting to be played. And I'm excited for that. I mean, monkey game good. There's discourse of it not winning game of the year, but I don't care.
It won Player's Choice.
It did win Player's Choice. People do love the game, and I'm excited to experience it. I'm excited to be Monkey. Second one, which also just came out uh 11 days ago. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle.
Yes.
I also would have bought this game at launch. And honestly, if it released on PS5, I probably would have already finished it. But I'm waiting for the PS5 release. I'm hoping that it releases physically on PS5 and the whole game is included on disc because it wasn't like that for Xbox. But I'm kind of waiting out for that. I'll probably still get it digitally if not. But I was kind of waiting. Like I've always liked Indiana Jones, but I've never loved Indiana Jones. But hearing that the game is great, I've been kind of inspired. I want to go back and watch the original 4 movies.
Oh yeah.
If you ask certain people, the only 4 movies that exist for it. Apparently.
Maybe not the 4th one though.
Maybe not the 4th one.
The first 3, yeah. Because in
Isn't
the 4th one,
the Last Crusade?
I think that's the 3rd one. Isn't the 4th one with Shia LaBeouf?
I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna watch the good Indiana Jones movies. I'll just leave it at that. But like, Troy Baker, I love that man. He is such a good performer, and that man, protect that man at all costs. I love Troy Baker. He's great. Phenomenal performer. But just like seeing the way, even from an outsider looking in, just the way he recreated, Harrison Ford, it is just crazy. And it looks like, how people have described it is a video game that is like an Indiana Jones movie. And I think that's enough for me to definitely check it out. Going over a couple things that didn't release this year, I guess Cyberpunk has to get added to this list now, which was not there before. Mafia Definitive Edition. We'll be getting to this a little bit later for stuff we're looking forward to next year. But I want to go on a little bit of a Mafia binge. Grew up with Mafia 2, and I hear that the remake of Mafia is really good. And honestly, that's probably going to be one of the first games I get to next year. I got it for free on GOG. So I'm really looking forward to that. A couple more. Stray, I bought it. More cat game. I was gonna play it because it was like, it's 4 or 5 hours. I'll play it. It's on my shelf still, so I'm gonna get to that. And then I'm slowly, finally inching closer to the Uncharted series. I've been getting kind of some urges to play it, but it hasn't worked out just yet. But years are long, so I think I might get to at least like the first Uncharted game next year.
Oh yeah, that Uncharted series eludes me a lot, but it's also kind of like maybe I get to it at some point. But yeah, great picks. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to everything that we wanted to this year, but that's why there are more years after this one.
That's why backlogs exist, baby.
Exactly. Backlog.com, not sponsored. We wanted to make this a little bit more of a fuller episode and be able to talk about the whole of the Video Game Awards, but things panned out differently. We can yap. Let's just say that. It bodes well for future episodes. But for right now, kind of thrown off the rails a bit. But that doesn't matter. We're still going to talk about it anyways because fuck time.
Exactly. I agree.
Everybody knows who won. Everybody knows there's the discussions around that. And we've kind of missed the boat on that. But a lot of the hype moments from the Video Game Awards are from specifically the trailers.
There's a lot to look forward to.
A lot of stuff. They came out hard with a lot of good shit. Witcher 4 to start was crazy.
Intergalactic?
Intergalactic, yes.
The controversy around that. I won't even begin to try and break down the bullshit that's been said about Intergalactic so far. But I'm a big fan of Naughty Dog. I think they make very good story-driven games. Fun fact: The Last of Us Part 2 is probably going to be the first game that I finish next year. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, finally. You said you were back on that, huh?
Yeah, retro, futuristic, space. I have just enough for me to be like, yeah, I'm probably gonna I'm interested in it. Interested to kind of see where they take that. But the game that oh boy, that took the Game Awards for me by a mile, and I know I feel like this is very, niche, but is Mafia the Old Country? Yes. That trailer was fucking phenomenal. Mafia has been a series that I have felt a lot of love for. I have amazing memories playing Mafia 2 with one of my best friends growing up. Mafia has always been a series I've appreciated from afar, but now going into 2025 and being able to be present for a Mafia release that I do 100% plan on playing, taking place in Sicily, Italy. The game looks gorgeous. And
it looks beautiful.
The way they're kind of framing the story just looks so interesting in it. The Mafia games have always been very period pieces. It seems like they're going to be, going even further with that idea, in Mafia the Old Country. I'm really looking forward to it. Every year I'm like, wow, games can't look any better. And then something else comes. I'm like, damn.
Yep.
That looks pretty fucking good.
Yep.
I think the obvious answers are like, Witcher 4 or Intergalactic if you're a super big Naughty Dog fan. I am super, super looking forward to Mafia the Old Country. But in second place, though, I will bring up is Split Fiction. The studio,
Oh, yes. Yes.
that looks really good. I played through like 99% of It Takes Two with my girlfriend. This was just another trailer that was just phenomenal. Got right to it. Comes out in March. This will definitely be a day one purchase that I play with my partner. So I'm really looking forward to that. It Takes Two is it was a very unique and different game. It's a very creative studio. It Takes Two is super creative, and Split Fiction looks like they're going to be, taking that even further. So I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Yeah, Split Fiction was a standout for me. I was like, wait, who? Oh, okay, lovely. And that trailer did do a lot of great work for getting across like what the game was about and what you're going to be doing in it. A lot of trailers don't do that nowadays, but that one did. Yeah, I think for my list, I haven't finished Elden Ring. I know I can beat it. It's just the amount of time that it takes and the frustration that comes with it is not ideal for me. But I do want to get to it. Now, for another reason, Elden Ring Night Rain, a lot of people knew what it was as soon as they saw like the brick textures from frame 1, which was kind of hilarious. I was like, that's an Elden Ring game. But they just said they weren't making another one. What the fuck? So this was a huge surprise to everybody. I'm just going to throw it out there because, again, haven't finished Elden Ring. Not even close, but I do want to get to it. Witcher 4, obviously. Same thing with Witcher 3. Got to it. I know I can beat it. I just haven't. It just takes too much time. But I am excited to get to that. Witcher 3 and then Witcher 4 after that. Ciri as the Witcher now looks kind of exciting. Dispatch.
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Oh yeah. I just want more superheroes in my games, and not just from like a Spider-Man or Batman.
I just want more Aaron Paul in my games.
That too. Aaron Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Aaron Paul is a gem. I like the idea of sort of like controlling superheroes and where they go and what duties they take on, and under like being graded for that to a certain level. The whole concept, it's just kind of like, oh, that does actually sound fun. I really hope that is fun while playing.
And it's also by Telltale devs.
Yes.
Like I wasn't. I thought it was gonna be kind of like, just like the Dispatch kind of thing where it's like a strategy game. That was my first impression of it. But hearing more about it and like seeing who's making it, it seems like it's gonna be like a pretty true to a lot of the older Telltale games, The Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, that kind of stuff. That is enough to have me intrigued to kind of see what they do with that and to see what story they tell there. I'm very interested. I'm gonna be keeping a very close eye on that one.
Yes. I think outside of the big things like Elden Ring and whatnot, that is the one that I'm most excited for. It also turns out here that your character was a superhero in this game, and you are now delegated to being the dispatcher. So it's sort of like a take a step back game. Mind yourself. You aren't these guys anymore. You're sort of getting a different look, at least from the character's perspective. Washed up, exactly. Outer Worlds 2. Outer Worlds 2 is huge for me, mainly because of Avowed and Obsidian. I think they made what's it called? Outer Worlds 1, which I didn't get to because
it's on my backlog for next year.
Yeah,
the trailer for Outer Worlds 2 though. It was a very good trailer, at least in my opinion.
Yes, I will say that it looks like what I wanted from Outer Worlds 1. Even though I never played Outer Worlds 1, I don't know what to expect going into it, but I have played Obsidian games before. I'm looking forward to the year that they're about to have. Avowed isn't something that was talked about at this Game Awards, but that's something that I do want to play on release. Also, Outer Worlds 2 is another big one. I think Spider-Man 2 on PC is something that you said that I am a little bit miffed about, because I bought my PlayStation 5 the day that Spider-Man 2 came out. I bought it more so for Ragnarok, even though that was coming to PC even sooner, but whatever. These games come to PC so quickly now that shouldn't be a reason why you get PS5, but I did it anyways. I think Mafia, you've put it on my radar. I think the biggest problem that people had with that trailer is that there were no fat people. Where are the fat people?
What?
Tons of great games coming out next year. Mafia Old Country, Elden Ring Night Rain, Dispatch, that other It Takes Two style game.
Split Fiction.
I will put that in my brain and keep it there. Split Fiction. Yes. Gosh, what an episode. What a long episode. Hopefully it's not too long for you guys on the other end hearing this, but Jesus.
First and last one of the year.
First and last one of the year, we had to go all out. We had to yap until we could not yap anymore. My lips are sticking together as I'm talking and I just can't finish this. So we're going to head out soon. Toby, is there anything you wanted to drop on the audience before we head out?
Yeah. I mean, just a little bit of a year in review. I was expecting 2024 to kind of be a slower year after 2023 because that is like the logical thing to assume. And while it was like a much slower start to the year, I mean, I think some amazing games came out this year. Was able to continue a lot of the trends from 2023 and just like the quality of releases. I wasn't expecting to have a bunch of new games come out and quickly become some of my favorites, like the Silent Hill 2 remake, Stellar Blade, and I think I don't think I said Astrobot, but like those three specifically. Also having enough time because it did feel a lot less chaotic and cluttered than 2023, which is not a slight at 2023 at all. Having good games is nothing to complain about, but I was able to take a ton of time to go back and play other games. Right now, as it stands, and it's probably going to stay the same, I finished a total of 30 games in 2024, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of those games, granted, were smaller experiences, but like I really, really got to make my palette for games a lot more diverse this year. 2024 was great. It was the best of both worlds, getting a lot of the old and also a lot of the new. I know what games I like a lot more now. I think, going into the future, I'm going to have a lot easier time, picking and choosing games. I'm very optimistic for next year. I think next year's going to be crazy with releases. Like it sucks seeing everything that's going on with the industry, but I think for the people who are saying there's nothing good to play anymore, I think are just plain wrong and are playing the wrong games. I think there's a lot to look forward to, and I think there's also going to be a lot to clown on too. Concord was online for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
which
that
honestly,
was insane.
I mean, when you have a lot of the successes, it's easier to look at those,
It's like,
incidents and see them as like more of like, oh, haha, this is funny and just this one thing. But it does suck. There is a lot of really annoying stuff going on with the industry and developers being mistreated and all this bullshit. There is still good stuff coming out. And I do think when it comes to game quality, I think we're in a really, really great spot. There's phenomenal stuff coming out. Baldur's Gate 3, Astrobot, Elden Ring, God of War, Ragnarok. There's been plenty of good stuff coming out.
Oh yeah, and plenty of stuff that keeps getting supported too. Like Cyberpunk wasn't great at release and it just keeps getting better. No Man's Sky was another awful release and took a couple of years, and I played that not this year but last year. I put like 30 hours into that, like as soon as I picked it up, because it was just so captivating and they put so much care into after the fact. I think we are in a time right now where we sort of see the potential for this industry and where it can go. But I think there are certain people who have a little bit too much power who kind of hedge their bets on these creative people in this industry and sort of put a ton of work on them in order to meet a goal when they could just allow them to create and break goals that people never knew existed, like Baldur's Gate 3. Sort of like made everybody put their head down. It's like, you want us to do that? A game that works? Why? It's like, because we're giving you money. That's why. Because you work your staff to the bone and we don't want to have to sit there and criticize the thing that you made them put out. We don't want to have to put them through that.
If you make a great game, it'll pay off.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's tough, stuff gets into development hell and whatnot, Oh, that's another, that made me think about a game that was in development hell, Metroid Prime 4, as well as Pokemon Legends A or something. There's a new Pokemon game coming out next year and Metroid Prime game coming out next year. That's just another tidbit to add to the list that I want to play. But games can do great things when you let their teams foster. Don't give them enough rope to hang themselves, let them work, let them cook, give them their time. And I love that the Game Awards have started presenting the Game of the Year award through the person who won last year, through the studio or the team that won last year. That was a great touch. Seeing Larian up on stage presenting to the team that made Astrobot was something special. In the speech that they gave, I think speeches after that one specifically are going to hopefully take a turn, because obviously there's a lot of people out there who speak up for the teams and try not to ruffle too many feathers and speak out about things that matter. But I think now it's going to be like, this team made this. It wasn't the corporation. The team made it, and the team made it great. And the corporation kind of got in the way a little bit. So I like to see that turn. It's a bit hopeful from me, obviously, but I don't know. Just seeing Larian up there present that award was nice. It was a nice touch.
Do you have any final thoughts or farewells to 2024 before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think 2024 really changed my perspective on time and how I treat it. For a lot of my life, I've been trying to barrel into the next thing, get me into the next stage of my life. I want to experience that. But getting older, waking up at 25 this year and having literally every joint in my body ache, I just wanted to rest and I wanted to experience, relief from that pain and experience life without that pain, in contrast to that pain, and to just extend myself more without stressing myself out. I want to experience moments more so I can look back on them more often. And that's translated into the games that I play. It's made me think more about what I do with my time, who I spend my time with, how I consider the people around me and their time as well. And it's ultimately made me a more fulfilled person to just experience the moment and not necessarily capitalize on it, but bring it to the next moment and keep that momentum going, or allow that momentum to sort of slow down when it needs to, and just letting time take me and not stressing it too much,
I think that was beautifully said.
Well, it's been great, Toby. I really appreciate every conversation we have, and hopefully the next time we get to everything that we wrote down.
Well, hey, this is the first one. That's it. That's actually the full sentence. I didn't have anything else to say after that.
that was beautiful.
You're welcome.
No, it is the first one. Also the
I'm glad I
last
can
one of the
provide.
year. I'm excited to do this more. I'm excited we got here to do this, to talk, man. We do it. We do it more often than it might seem to the people watching, but being able to sit down, record, and fully capture our thoughts. Well, not fully, obviously, but to express the thoughts we are able to touch on in a thoughtful manner with one another. I always appreciate that. And now we get to put it out to the world. We get to interact with people on this. So, hopefully someone sees and wants to chat with us. That would be dope. But yeah, man, I think that's it for checkpoint number 1. Next episode isn't coming out until next year. So we'll see you guys.
Yeah. We'll see you at the end of 2025 with with the final episode
with
of
our greatest games played and what we're looking forward to playing in 2026. That's correct.
Yeah. We'll keep that trend up. One a year.
Yep. One checkpoint a year. Anyways.